The buzz of a high-end restaurant in downtown New York was alive with laughter and the clinking of glasses. It was an evening of indulgence, with patrons dressed in designer clothes and expensive perfumes filling the air. But amidst the grandeur, a man entered who clearly didn't belong. He was an elderly, homeless veteran, his weathered face telling stories of hardships endured. His tattered coat barely held against the winter chill, and his boots had seen better days. He shuffled through the restaurant's grand entrance, holding a small, folded American flag close to his chest like a sacred relic. The room went silent for a moment, then whispers began. Some patrons shot disapproving glances. Others looked uncomfortable, while a few shifted in their seats, clearly wishing he'd leave. The veteran approached the hostess stand, his voice soft but firm. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said. "I just wanted to see the place where I fought for everyone to enjoy meals like these." The hostess hesitated, glancing nervously at her manager. "Sir, this is a private establishment," she began, her tone polite but firm. "If you're not dining, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to leave." The veteran nodded, not arguing, and turned to leave. But before he could take a step, a deep, unmistakable voice broke through the murmurs of the room. "Wait!" Heads turned as a man in a sharp navy suit stood up from a corner table. His unmistakable golden hair and confident posture made it clear who he was. Donald J. Trump. The room fell into stunned silence as Trump walked toward the veteran. "Excuse me," Trump said, his voice carrying authority, "but I'd like to know why a man who fought for this country can't even stay to enjoy a meal in a restaurant he helped protect." The manager, caught off guard, stammered, "Mr. Trump, it's just policy. We—" "Policy?" Trump interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "Let me tell you something about policy. Policies are meant to serve people, not turn them away." The veteran looked up, his eyes glistening with emotion. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble, sir," he said softly. "I just wanted to feel normal again, even for a moment." Trump turned to the veteran, his expression softening. "You're not causing trouble," he said. "You're reminding us of what real sacrifice looks like." He then gestured to the table he'd been sitting at. "Please join me for dinner." The room was stunned. Some patrons looked embarrassed, while others seemed moved by the gesture. The veteran hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice cracking. As they walked toward the table, Trump turned to the manager. "Make sure he gets whatever he wants," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And put it on my tab." The whispers in the room turned to quiet admiration. No one had expected such an act of kindness in the middle of a bustling restaurant, least of all from a man as polarizing as Trump. What would unfold during their meal, however, would take the entire room on a journey they would never forget. The two men sat down at the table, the veteran's hands trembling slightly as he took a seat across from Trump. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted, a quiet reverence filling the air. The staff, unsure how to proceed, stood at a distance, waiting for any further direction. Trump gestured for the waiter to approach. "Bring us whatever he wants," he repeated, his voice calm but firm, "and make sure it's something he enjoys." The waiter nodded, still in shock over what had just transpired. The veteran looked down at the menu but seemed hesitant, as if the luxury of the options before him was too much to absorb. Finally, he chose something simple, a steak with mashed potatoes and a glass of water. As the waiter walked away, Trump leaned forward, his expression softening. "You know," Trump began, "I've met a lot of people in my life, but the ones who really left a mark on me are the ones who served. They sacrificed their lives so we could sit here in places like this and enjoy our meals without fear. I think that's something people forget." The veteran looked up, surprised by Trump's words. "You're right," he said quietly. "I did it for this country, but sometimes it feels like people forget what we did, what we went through." He paused, swallowing hard as he looked down at the table. "I came here tonight because I wanted to feel remembered." Trump nodded. "You are. You're not invisible. But sometimes the world needs a reminder." The veteran smiled, a tear slipping down his weathered cheek. "Thank you. I wasn't expecting this. I thought I'd be turned away again, just like every other place." Trump's eyes softened as he took a deep breath. "You shouldn't have to feel like that. No one who served should ever feel forgotten, and no one who served should ever have to beg for a seat at the table." As the meal arrived, the conversation turned from politics to stories of life during the veteran's time in the service. Trump listened intently, sharing stories of his own experiences with determination and respect. The two men from vastly different worlds found common ground in the shared understanding of sacrifice and duty. The rest of the restaurant watched in silence, the atmosphere now completely different from when the veteran first walked in. There was no longer judgment or discomfort, only respect. When the meal finished, Trump stood up first, extending his hand to the veteran. "I'll make sure people remember you," he said firmly. "You deserve that." The veteran shook his hand, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for not forgetting." Trump turned to the manager, who had been quietly observing from the side. "This man deserves to be treated like any other guest. You're going to make sure of that every time he walks in here. Understand?" The manager nodded, visibly moved by the encounter. "Yes, Mr. Trump. Of course." As Trump and the veteran walked out of the restaurant together, the once judgmental whispers turned into applause. People who had once turned their backs on the homeless man now stood to cheer, realizing that their preconceived notions had been shattered in the most unexpected way. For the veteran, it was more than just a meal. It was a reminder that he mattered, that his sacrifices were not forgotten, and that no matter how lost he felt, there were still people out there willing to stand up for him. And for everyone who had witnessed the moment, it was a lesson in compassion, humility, and the power of simply standing up for someone when they need it most. The ripple effect of that night would last far longer than the meal. The story of that evening quickly went viral, circulating across news outlets, social media platforms, and even late-night talk shows. Clips of Trump's unexpected act of kindness spread like wildfire, igniting conversations in households, offices, and public spaces across the country. Opinions were divided, but one thing was undeniable. The story had struck a chord. The public reaction was overwhelmingly emotional. Veterans from all walks of life came forward, sharing their own stories of hardship and gratitude. Some were deeply moved by Trump's gesture, while others questioned the motivations behind it. Still, the core message remained clear. One act of kindness could shift a nation's perspective, even if just for a moment. Veterans organizations inspired by the event began to rally together, advocating for better care and attention to the needs of those who had served. One organization even launched a campaign called Never Forgotten, calling for improved benefits, job opportunities, and mental health services for veterans. The message was simple. They had given so much, and it was time for society to give back. The moment also sparked a larger discussion on homelessness, with many citizens now questioning the way society treats those who have fallen through the cracks. News outlets interviewed psychologists and sociologists about the systemic issues that lead to homelessness, while citizens took to social media to call for change. The image of the homeless veteran sitting across from a billionaire former president had captured the heart of the nation. For the homeless veteran, whose name was eventually revealed to be Thomas Caldwell, life after that evening was radically different. The outpouring of support was overwhelming. A GoFundMe page was set up for him, raising hundreds of thousands of dollars to help get him back on his feet. He was offered a job by several local businesses and even received an apartment in a building that provided housing for veterans in need. But what mattered most to Thomas was the shift in how he was seen. People stopped looking at him as just another homeless man and began to see him as a person, a man who had served his country, a man who deserved respect. Elon Musk, who had quietly followed the story, reached out to Thomas, offering him an opportunity to work with SpaceX on a special project aimed at helping veterans. Thomas, though hesitant at first, accepted the offer. In time, he became part of a groundbreaking initiative that helped veterans find new careers in aerospace technology. Meanwhile, Trump's gesture continued to reverberate. Interviews followed, with both Trump and Thomas speaking candidly about their experience that evening. Trump, typically known for his blunt rhetoric, appeared deeply moved as he recounted the moment. "It wasn't about politics," he said in an interview. "It was about standing up for someone who needed it. That's what we should all do." In the weeks that followed, other restaurants, once hesitant to welcome those struggling with homelessness, began opening their doors. The act of standing up for the most vulnerable had set a new standard of compassion, one that would influence policies, businesses, and individuals alike. For Thomas, the night spent with Trump had been a turning point, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there were still people who cared. He continued his work with the Veterans Initiative, helping to rebuild the lives of those who had served their country but had been left behind. The story didn't end with the meal. It became a movement that reminded the country of its forgotten heroes, its most vulnerable citizens, and the power of simple human kindness. And as the days turned into months and the months into years, the memory of that night stayed alive in the hearts of many, echoing the timeless truth that no one, no matter how broken, should ever be forgotten. As the months passed, the ripple effect of that night continued to shape the conversation around veterans, homelessness, and kindness in ways no one had anticipated. The Never Forgotten campaign gained momentum, with politicians, celebrities, and even activists coming together to support policies designed to improve the lives of veterans and the homeless. What began as a single act of kindness in a restaurant became a national conversation about respect, empathy, and societal responsibility. Thomas Caldwell's story became a symbol of hope for many who had long been overlooked by society. His journey from homelessness to working at SpaceX was shared widely, inspiring countless others in similar situations to believe that change was possible. He became an advocate for the rights of veterans, speaking at rallies and events, urging the government to take better care of those who had served. His partnership with Elon Musk on the veteran-focused initiative proved to be transformative. The project, which aimed to integrate veterans into the rapidly growing tech industry, became one of the most successful veteran outreach programs in the country. More than 10,000 veterans were given job opportunities, training, and mentorship through the program, helping them transition from military service to civilian careers in fields ranging from aerospace to artificial intelligence. On the political front, the discussion about homelessness became a focal point of several major policy changes. In Washington, bipartisan support grew for new housing initiatives targeting homeless veterans. Shelters in rehabilitation centers were better funded, while programs to address mental health issues and addiction were expanded. Restaurants and businesses across the nation began adopting more inclusive practices. Inspired by the dinner that had changed everything, many took a stand against discrimination based on appearance or social status. Some even went so far as to establish pay-it-forward programs where customers could donate meals to those in need, ensuring that no one would ever have to feel as though they weren't welcome. Back at the restaurant where it all began, the owner had made a public apology for the way the veteran had initially been treated. "We got it wrong," the owner admitted. "We were blind to the humanity in front of us. But we've learned and we've changed." The restaurant then introduced a special Veterans Night once a month, offering free meals to veterans and their families. But the most significant change was internal. The shift in the way people saw each other, the divide between social classes, political beliefs, and even personal identities seemed to soften as the story of that evening spread. People began to look at one another not as strangers or enemies, but as fellow human beings worthy of respect and kindness. Trump, who had been at the center of the controversy, spoke about the lasting impact of that dinner in an interview several months later. "I never expected it to go this far," he admitted. "I just wanted to do what was right. What I didn't know was that it would spark something much bigger than any of us." For Thomas, the changes in his life were profound. From a man who had once felt invisible, he now had a platform to advocate for those who were still being overlooked. And while the national spotlight faded, Thomas never stopped fighting for the cause that had given him his life back. Fighting for veterans, for the homeless, for the forgotten. The lesson was clear. Kindness, when given without expectation, had the power to change lives, inspire nations, and heal even the deepest wounds. It wasn't just about one dinner or one act of generosity. It was about the ongoing movement to restore humanity's faith in one another. As Thomas Caldwell looked back on that unforgettable night, he smiled. Maybe it wasn't just about a meal, he thought. Maybe it was about starting something bigger than all of us. And it all started with someone taking a stand. And as the years went on, the impact of that night continued to be felt, with more and more people realizing that sometimes it only takes one person, one moment to make the world a little bit better.